Time travel. Al Bielek and his trip to 2749 and 2137. This video is my response to the Al Bielek testimony, in which he describes a trip he claims to have made into the future. If you have not seen the two videos, click on the links you see now on the screen and watch them first. One trip is to the year 2137, and the other is a trip to 2749. That's 806 years into the future from 1943 on the long trip, and 194 years on the short hop. But I have problems with both, as you will see. At first, I found the story quite believable, because it sounded plausible on the surface. But after many years of believing this tale, I think otherwise, and I'm going to tell you my reasons for doubting this testimony. I do not wish to discredit Al Bielek, because I think he told what he believed to be the truth. If there was a lie that was told, he may not have been aware of it. As I said, I was a big fan of Al Bielek and believed everything he said for about a decade. But recently I started doing videos about this alleged trip to the future and made some discoveries which shattered my confidence. And as my argument unfolds, it might pop your balloon too. I don't want to pop any kid's balloon because they cry. But at some time a kid has to come to terms with reality. The main problem I have with Al Bielek's trip is language. He didn't have any difficulty fitting into these future societies. I think language would have changed dramatically over 806 years. 806 years ago, our language was called Middle English, not Old English. Here is a sentence in Middle English. Can you read it? ICC was PAERPAERICRISSTNEDD WASORRMINBINAMENEMMNEDD. Can you read that? It says, where I was christened, I was named Orman by name. That's Middle English. And it looks like a foreign language to us today. Look at the second red box. Looks like piss. PISS, BOCISS, NEMMNEDD, ORRMULUM, FORRPI, PATT, ORRM, ITT, ROWROHHTE. The first word that looks like piss is this. Imagine that. BOC is book. Is has two S's. Named is spelled Nemned. This book is named Ormulum because Orm created it. That's what that sentence means. Now, do you think that we could take a trip back to that time and fit right in? Or do you think they could come to our time and fit right in? They would find our language has changed so much that they don't fit in. I can read these two Middle English sentences now, but it took some time to understand how they expressed themselves early in the 13th century. We have seen our own language change dramatically over the past 50 years, and I think the future will see much faster changes in our language as new industries are born and new words are required to express concepts. Later in this video, I will give you 20 or 30 examples. But let me warm up a bit with some other problems I have with this alleged trip. If Al Bielek traveled to a future where there were only 500 million of us left, they would not need floating cities, and here's why. The Earth has 7.1 billion people now in 2013, which is about 47 people per square mile. When I first looked this up, I was floored. 47 people per square mile? Are you shitting me? Each person has about 99 city lots all to himself. Most of us live in cities and it's crowded. But how crowded can it get? 100 people per square mile? No. 1,000 people per square mile? Nope. 10,000? Nope. Let me tell you the three highest, starting with the one that's third from the top. Compare 47 people per square mile to that of Singapore, Monaco, and Macau, which have population densities as follows. Singapore, 18,645 people per square mile. Monaco, 42,143 people per square mile. Macau, that's in China, 73,350 people per square mile. As I said, the Earth has a population density on average of 47 people per square mile. And anyone who lives in Singapore, Monaco, or Macau doesn't say that it's intolerable to have so many people living in such a small space of 1 square mile. Does everyone have a toilet and some water to drink, food to eat? Of course they do. They would die without it. But the slave masters of earth want to kill people because they're bored and greedy and they have no ethics or morality. This ruling class wants to kill 13 out of every 14 people and trim down to something that a slave owner could manage, and their number is 500 million. I think the world would be much better off without this ruling class. Now, why don't common people defend themselves and get rid of those who are plotting murder against them? This needs to be done immediately in self-defense. We have 7.1 billion people going to school, learning how to become productive, inventing things, creating beauty, and contributing to make the world a better place. And they could do a lot better if they had some help from the ruling class. Most of the world is poor because of these greedy, service-to-self types. If anyone lacks an education, it's their fault, not the fault of those who are too poor to attend college. I blame the greedy. Everyone needs an education, and it's up to the rulers to see that everyone is well-fed, housed, adequately and properly educated, so they can perform some needed function in society. Common people create all the wealth, but it has to be organized by the ruling class. The ruling class is failing the poor, and therefore isn't fit to lead. All common people are suffering as a result. As they produce wealth, it is taken from them like ranchers take from cattle. The beekeeper takes honey from the bees. And the people need to understand that we can do just fine without leaders. All leaders are corrupt. They don't invent things, they take things. Who's going to invent if the inventors are dead? The tyrants? They aren't clever enough to invent anything. They are parasites. That's what they're good at. They steal lucrative businesses and the wealth of the common people. That's all they're good for. They're never going to invent something useful as Steve Jobs did. Were they afraid of Steve Jobs? Did they eliminate him? We have a handful of mentally ill tyrants who want to murder several billion innocent people. And every one of us needs to do something about this. Do the common people of the world have a right to live? This small group doesn't think so. The elite already own everything of value, including all the best businesses. Did they ever think that they're killing off their own customers? This is why I think they are insane. Did they ever look at the average population density to find what I found? That it's only 47 people per square mile? And some cities have tens of thousands of people per square mile? And I bet you most of the Committee of 300 have been to Monaco, Singapore, and Macau, had fun in these cities, and apparently haven't considered what happens if all the inhabitants of those cities are murdered by insane tyrants. There isn't going to be any future for most of us if we allow this mentally deranged group of know-it-alls to carry out their plans to murder 6.6 billion people. Is that why they are spraying our air, poisoning our water with toxic industrial wastes, and contaminating our vaccines with pig viruses and carcinogens? We need to identify this Committee of 300 and tie their hands permanently by putting them in a 9-foot by 12-foot jail cell for the rest of their lives, where they can't hurt anyone. Plotting to murder someone is a criminal offense almost everywhere on earth. We, the people, are justified in jailing them. If Macau can survive with 73,350 people per square mile, then the world can survive with a population density of just 47 people per square mile. And those murderers don't need to kill almost everyone on the planet. They have intentionally kept the masses very, very poor. What we need is to take all the wealth from these murderers and use their trillions to provide adequate food, water, housing, and education for those who are too poor to have life's basics. That would certainly make this a better world. But this elite class has used propaganda to convince you and everyone you know that the earth can't sustain 47 people per square mile. I don't think this is even a little bit true. I think it's a giant propaganda campaign with murder as their ultimate goal. They are finding that they can't manage us quite as well, and so they think they can have total control over us if they kill most of us and manage a smaller group of slaves, and I think slavery should be outlawed. I favor freeing the slaves. Now, what do you people think? Have I made my case? Then this future that Al Bielek allegedly traveled to was perhaps a false memory planted to sell us on two things. One, centralized control, which never worked in the 74-year Soviet Union experiment, and I don't want central planners because I know very well that there are no goods on the store shelves under this system. Prices were very high, and the quality of all goods and services was inferior. Number two, socialism, in which government takes everything from the producer and pretends to take care of all the needs of the enslaved. This is bullshit. Government never takes care of the people. It's the other way around. The people have to take care of all the needs of the dirty, rotten, parasitic government. And if you just look at Congress's health care plan and ours, you'll see that ours is not good enough for them. They have to have their own, a much better plan, and who pays for ours? We do. Who pays for theirs? We do. They're too elite to pay for their own health care. They live off us like a rancher lives off his cattle. And that's what we are to them. Just a large herd of cattle from which to take whatever they need, whenever they need it, including sex from children. Bryce Taylor and Kathy O'Brien can tell you more. They produce nothing, and putting their health care costs on us is more insanity. Look at their retirement program and ours. We already have socialism in this country. And already we see the difference between our rated pension fund and their lavish retirement program, paid for again by us. No, socialism is bullshit, and the people get shit while the ruling class gets the best of everything. That's what the Soviet Union was all about. And under Putin, the common people still get shit, and the ruling class gets all the profits from oil. And some of the dirty bastards in Russia today own 25 Rolls Royces each, while their countrymen are nearly starving to death. Viktor Grebennikov was an entomologist, and his pay was $24 per month. Imagine how much the common man makes in Russia. Socialism makes everyone poor and never takes care of the poor. Socialism drains the poor of everything they have. It is clear from recent developments that what the ruling class has in mind in America is to have us all earning $24 per month and dependent on government for food stamps. 50 million Americans are already there. More to come. All you people who think you're rich will be as poor as church mice soon, by the looks of things. Obama granted himself the right to take any piece of equipment, any building, any business, any vehicle, any parcel of land, and your labor, without compensation to the owners. Read the executive orders if you want to know more about their evil plans. We need to stop them, and secession looks pretty good to me. How about you? Okay, now back to Al Bielek and this incredible story. I say it is quite possible that Al Bielek was planted with a false memory in which he goes around the country selling us on socialism and central planning. Everyone was sucking up the futuristic tale and accepting everything as the way it will be in the future. Then I came along and asked some questions, which got everyone thinking and debating the issues of this possibly fake trip. Now, are the Nazis going to ban my video from view and put me into Camp FEMA until they can kill me? I wouldn't put it past them, but I have to speak out regardless of their response. This situation is far more serious than most of you deem. I don't know about you, but the murder of 6.6 billion people is serious to me. Many of them are more deserving of life than this Committee of 300 gang of murderers and thieves. We all need to come up to speed on this and not allow them to sell us on socialism or this magic number of 500 million. The people of Earth are not the problem. Those who hold back inventions which could free the slaves, like free energy, are the real problem. Those who build nuclear power plants are the real problem, because each time a nuclear explosion takes place to make electricity, more and more damage is done to the container, and after a decade, that power plant is leaking too much, and too many people are dying of cancer. The ozone is also damaged, and I read Wendell Stevens' book, UFO Contact from the Pleiades, and they gave fair treatment to this nuclear topic. We can't explode nuclear bombs or use nuclear energy to make electricity any longer. We need those free energy devices now. And those who are standing in the way of them, and 6,000 other inventions which would make life easier, need to step down or be taken down so they can't do any more harm to the earth, the ozone, or the inhabitants. And I will continue to say this as long as I'm alive. Going back to Al Bielek now, we have possibly a false memory planted into the mind of a military man for the purpose of propaganda. Everyone loves to ponder the future, and so this popular vehicle is chosen to spread a lie, and Al Bielek is selected to tell others about a trip to the year 2749, where he fits in like he was born among them. The only problem is he comes back here with 1943 ideas, and over the years in telling his story, he forgets to tell us about any household appliance which does amazing things. Certainly there is a food device which can make anything in a snap. You want a serving of fresh pineapple? And this device, which is 806 years ahead of us, simply takes molecules from the air and makes your fresh pineapple, and it's so sweet that every one of the slices tastes like it's the bottom cut, where all the sugars are. And there is no outer crust that has to be carved off and given to the wild rabbits, who, by the way, love pineapple and the part of melons that we don't eat. And I always think of them when I cut fresh pineapple and melon. Did Al Bielek tell you about any of the wonderful devices they have in 2749? Hell no. That's because the military couldn't imagine. what might be invented in the future. You can always sort out the lies from the truth when you dig a little deeper. The hypnotist will give the subject a superficial layer, but he won't provide any deeper layers, usually. And if you probe just the reasonable questions, you will see that the entire story falls apart. Al, what kind of devices did you use in your 3 years in 2749? Was there a device for food? What did it do exactly? As a physicist, tell us how it worked. And while you're at it, tell us how they canceled gravity, because we can use that one too. If you built ion engines, a hoverboard should be easy, and make my car fly if you have the time. This kind of questioning puts a sudden end to all the bullshit, doesn't it? If Al can't tell us some amazing stories about devices and what they do, then he's full of shit. The acceleratron just isn't going to cut it for me. This is too simple. An idiot from the military of 1943 could come up with this bullshit. I want to know about an amazing device that is so easy to understand, and it does something truly miraculous, like the microwave oven of the 1970s. But Al didn't talk about microwave ovens to heat things up, so that means the stupid guy who programmed him didn't have enough imagination to go 27 years into our future, and we're supposed to be fooled by this asshole on a tale that is 806 years into a 1943 future? I was fooled for about a decade, but I think I'm starting to get a clue. How about you? When the false memory was implanted, we didn't even have microwaves. I had a microwave in my store in 1974, and I used to make baked potatoes for lunch. Customers would come into my store, and I'd serve them baked potatoes. One customer, Mrs. Peters, thought a microwave gave off nuclear radiation. Incidentally, she was killed in a car accident in about 1975. Very sad. Nice lady. Did the military man of 1943 foresee microwaves? Hell no. This might explain why Al Bielek didn't report on anything like a microwave to heat up food, or any kind of device of similar size which produces any kind of food you desire from molecules which are arranged on the nanoscale. We didn't have nanotechnology in 1943, and we didn't know that we could build an electrical device that could heat up potatoes from the inside out without an oven. This military man, who I suspect planted the false memory, also didn't conceive of the internet, which could come about in our own time, and Al Bielek, the physicist, could not figure out how the computers talk to one another. On April 20th, 2000, when Al Bielek was telling his story, he already knew about the internet. Yet the original programming was still there, and he was telling us in this recorded testimony that he just couldn't figure out how computers could talk to one another in various cities. This was a big clue for me. How about you? Did you find yourself yelling at the screen, "Internet! Internet, dummy! Internet! That's how they did it, the Internet! The World Wide Web!" There are other problems which I will cover briefly. Then I want to give you some examples of how our language changed after the Internet, in case you don't realize that a nation's language is a living thing and changes with technology, social structure, new techniques for manufacturing, slang, and so on. Let's talk briefly about anti-gravity. Al Bielek reports that they have floating cities. This is a 1943 idea, if ever I heard one, and it's goofy as hell. Al Bielek says that every 300 floors they have to add another anti-gravity device because the previous one, some 300 floors down, has lost its effect. If there was that much mass in midair, the wind would topple this 2,200-story building like a piece of toilet paper in a tornado. The higher you go up, the stronger the winds, asshole. Has this military man ever heard of the jet stream? Well, I can tell you with certainty that the asshole who programmed Al Bielek had not heard of the jet stream and didn't know shit about physics, especially the physics of a 2,200-story structure floating 5,000 feet above the earth, as Al explains it. And the author's ignorance shows in the kooky tale that Al Bielek tells. But he fooled me at first, but not for long. After a decade, I caught on. Did he fool you, or were you always skeptical? If you were skeptical, why didn't you tell anyone? Maybe the truth is you were fooled also, as I was. Remember, people, to always question authority and everyone else, because they will lie to you, and they will have a hypnotized victim do the lying. They will murder you and have a hypnotized Manchurian candidate to do the killing. And he might be a college student like Andy Perro. If you have not watched the Project Superman series on this channel, I highly recommend that you do so, because Andy Perro's personal testimony is extremely valuable in understanding what military and government did to him, so you can see what actually happened to Al Bielek, Preston Nichols, and Duncan Cameron. I don't know what actually happened. I just have a theory that the memory was implanted, and Al said he was brainwashed. He said Preston Nichols was undoing what the military had done to several subjects, and that they admonished him, and he had to stop deprogramming people. Those were Al Bielek's own words. Do you believe him? Did military program Al Bielek as he said? And did military also program Preston Nichols, who said, "Who can deprogram me?" Recall that Preston Nichols also deprogrammed Duncan Cameron to some extent. In the case of Andy Perro, every time Andy would come out of the spell, they'd capture him and put him under again. But Andy developed special compartments in his brain, and he outsmarted them. Bryce Taylor was programmed to be a child prostitute for the rich and famous, like Bob Hope, John F. Kennedy, Neil Diamond, and many others, which you can read about in her book. But she had an accident and came out of the spell too. Kathy O'Brien is another victim, and it was sexual in nature. How many kids are turning tricks for the CIA today? Hypnotized and putting out sex for the perverts who want to have sex with children. We need to know the truth, and we need to help others learn the truth about our ruling class, because they will become cannibals soon. It seems very likely to me that they will be eating us and using us as a body parts junkyard so they can have a new heart when theirs wears out, or a new liver when they drink themselves to the point that theirs no longer functions. The military man who wrote this false memory forgot that people would also be feeling the effects of anti-gravity in these 2,200-story towers. The guy who dreamed this up doesn't know physics, but Al does. And for some reason, his physics background was blocked. I'm wondering if Al Bielek was a physicist, because he didn't ask any questions about physics, and anti-gravity would certainly be of interest to him if he is a physicist. And maintenance on computers would not be nearly as interesting. If he's clever enough to invent an ion engine and beat out Lockheed and Boeing, then why didn't he bring back anti-gravity for us here? Maybe some idiot thinks that we would blow up the planet if we knew how to relieve gravity from something. This again is bullshit. Also, why would anti-gravity work for 300 floors and then suddenly stop? If it tapered gradually, there would be a lot of mass in 2,200 floors, and that mass would certainly be put into motion by winds. How would you stabilize the torques? When winds blow, how would you stop the city from blowing away and crashing into another floating city? Al never told us how they move a city from one location to another. Did they have huge jets to push them around? What kind of torques would that have on a floating object? As soon as you start asking questions, the story starts coming down like building number 7. Remember building number 7 of the World Trade Center? Recall that government left it out of their report because it came down by magic. No plane hit it. And I'm going to keep bringing it up to expose the fraud that was perpetrated on the people until someone goes to jail for murder. George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld to start with. Then those in the CIA who carried it out, and those in Mossad. Now we're told another tall tale about floating cities. We have an anti-gravity device that gets tired after 300 floors. And we have to have another anti-gravity device for the next 300 floors. Bullshit. Any device which defies gravity for objects above it doesn't stop after 300 floors. Recall that Plotnikov's friend came in with a cigar, and the smoke rose when it drifted over the Plotnikov device. Gravity was only reduced by 2% in that case, and look at the cigar smoke. If you had 100% reduction of gravity, wouldn't the people be floating around? Their furniture would drift away each time someone left the door open, wouldn't it? Tell me you're going to go outside on the balcony with 600-mile-per-hour winds. This is all bullshit. Why do we even need a floating city if all the people are dead? The population density would be down to 3.3 people per square mile. People don't have to congregate in cities anymore. Remember, they didn't have to work. They could live far from the city because they didn't have jobs. If they contributed to society, could they do it from home in the country? Do you want to live next door to people with barking dogs? I don't. Why do people in the city have bars across their windows? Because some people in the neighborhood steal things. How far from them would you like to live? Round it off to the nearest mile, please. The entire story is bullshit. They're selling us on this number of 500 million and entertaining us with floating cities that aren't necessary and couldn't work because of the jet streams and the winds up there. I don't know about you, but during a thunderstorm, when I see bolts of lightning with millions of volts, the place I want to be is up there where the lightning is striking. I love a good jolt every now and then. Yeah, me and Frankenstein. No, this shit never happened. And we've been lied to again by government. Another major flaw is language. If Al was sent to the 1970s, he'd hear terms like far out, freak flag, and for sure, man, for sure. I lent my lawnmower to a guy back then, and I asked him if he was going to bring it back to me, and his answer was, oh, for sure, man, for sure. I haven't seen my lawnmower since 1975. Oh, for sure, man, for sure. Would Al Bielek fit in the 1970s just after Woodstock? Or would he look like somebody who just stepped out of a time machine from 1943? Al Bielek wanted us to believe that he stepped out of 1943 into 2137, and he fit right in, was there for 6 weeks, and then flew to 2749 and stayed there for 3 years without any problems. His English was so good that he became a tour guide. Everyone spoke 1943 English. No, it's not true. This is about as believable as someone appearing out of nowhere from the year 1207, a time when Middle English, 1100 to 1500, was spoken, unintelligible by the people of today. A guy from Genghis Khan's army walks into a time machine in 1207 and pops out in 2013, and I say to him, get that spreadsheet, it's about 15 megabytes, and send it to Al Bielek by email. He needs it ASAP. The Genghis Khan soldier would say what? In 1207 they didn't have electricity. This guy speaks Middle English, and he's going to understand me and become an emailing tour guide who works with spreadsheets that are 15 megabytes? Don't fill my head full of bullshit. This guy wouldn't even have a password, so how could he send an email, even if he understood the command? Imagine how well anyone from the 13th century would fit in today with email, megabytes, spreadsheets, and modems, all run on a computer which runs on electricity. Who do they think they're talking to? The 9/11 crowd of suckers and fools? Mind control this! I'm not your typical fluoride head, Fred. Do you still believe Al Bielek's story, or did I convince you with my cogent argument? In 806 years, language didn't change? Do you think American English will be the dominant language of the 28th century? I not only think that American English won't be on top, but I don't think America will even be remembered by most. You'd have to be a scholar to know whatever happened to a nation called America, which started out with a good idea, a constitution and the rule of law, and then some Nazis took over, tried to enslave us all, and that ruined everything. If Al Bielek left 1943 and popped out 60 years later in 2013, he'd find an entirely new vocabulary emerging out of the internet alone. And it's still in its infancy. Bytes, mouse, Google, database, spreadsheet, bandwidth, cyberspace, World Wide Web, email address, email, homepage, hyperlink, hypertext markup language HTML, keyword, keyboard, algorithm, loop, modem, mousepad, public domain, open source, spam, toolbar, recycle bin, web page, web address, website, URL, drag and drop, and many others. It's ludicrous that Al Bielek lands in the year 2749 and didn't mention a single new word. After centuries of advanced technology, this is bullshit. See you next time when we will take apart another government lie and set the slaves free. Thanks for watching. Time travel. Al Bielek and his trip to 2749 and 2137. This video is my response to the Al Bielek testimony, in which he describes a trip he claims to have made into the future. If you have not seen the two videos, click on the links you see now on the screen and watch them first. One trip is to the year 2137 and the other is a trip to 2749. That's 806 years into the future from 1943 on the long trip and 194 years on the short hop. But I have problems with both, as you will see. At first, I found the story quite believable because it sounded plausible on the surface. But after many years of believing this tale, I think otherwise, and I'm going to tell you my reasons for doubting this testimony. I do not wish to discredit Al Bielek. Here is a sentence in Middle English. Can you read it? ICC was PAERPAERICRISSTNEDD WASORRMINBINAMENEMMNEDD. Can you read that? It says, where I was christened, I was named Orman by name. That's Middle English. And it looks like a foreign language to us today. Look at the second red box. Looks like PISS, P-I-S-S, B-O-C-I-S-S-N-E-M-M-N-E-D-D, O-R-R-M-U-L-U-M, F-O-R-R-P-I, P-A-T-T, O-R-R-M, I-T-T-R-O-W-R-O-H-H, and new words are required to express concepts. Later in this video, I will give you 20 or 30 examples. But let me warm up a bit with some other problems I have with this alleged trip. If Al Bielek traveled to a future where there were only 500 million of us left, they would not need floating cities, and here's why. The Earth has 7.1 billion people now in 2013. which is about 47 people per square mile. When I first looked this up, I was floored. 47 people per square mile? Are you shitting me? Each person has about 99 city lots all to himself. Most of us live in cities and it's crowded. But how crowded can it get? 100 people per square mile? No. 1,000 TE. The first word that looks like piss is this. Imagine that. BOC is book. Is has two S's. Named is spelled Nemned. This book is named Ormulum because Orm created it. That's what that sentence means. Now, do you think that we could take a trip back to that time and fit right in? Or do you think they could come to our time and fit right in? They would find our language has changed so much that they don't fit in. I can read these two Middle English sentences now, but it took some time to understand how they expressed themselves early in the 13th century. We have seen our own language change dramatically over the past 50 years, and I think the future will see much faster changes in our language as new industries are born, because I think he told what he believed to be the truth. If there was a lie that was told, he may not have been aware of it. As I said, I was a big fan of Al Bielek and believed everything he said for about a decade. But recently I started doing videos about this alleged trip to the future and made some discoveries which shattered my confidence. And as my argument unfolds, it might pop your balloon too. I don't want to pop any kid's balloon because they cry. But at some time a kid has to come to terms with reality. The main problem I have with Al Bielek's trip is language. He didn't have any difficulty fitting into these future societies. I think language would have changed dramatically over 806 years. 806 years ago, our language was called Middle English, not Old English.